It was several days later whilst we lunched that new events transpired. I was returning to the classroom from the library with a new stack of books in hand. Phew! I'm pleased there were so many good books about Japan, but the combined weight of all this knowledge is rather hefty. Aww, she's educating herself. Akachi's reminiscences about Japan had fallen on fertile soil, and in the intervening days I chose to begin researching the country and its customs privately. And the more reading I did, the more I found myself appreciating the profundities of Japanese culture. Why, it was only 2 days past that I learned the difference between Zazen and Seiza. She's learning things. But just as I was about to enter the courtyard, books in hand, I caught sight of 2 familiar faces. Oh? Is that Holmes and Akachi? It wasn't as though seeing the 2 talking together was a particularly rare sight in itself. After all, they did converse in the classroom from time to time. But this time...
It's quite unusual for you to wish to speak with me alone.
Perhaps so, but there is something I need to ask you.
What's going on? They seem different than usual. I couldn't help but notice a certain tension that hung in the space between them. While I confessed to feeling a certain guilt at listening to their conversation, I simply couldn't suppress my curiosity and concealed myself behind a nearby pillar so as to better hear them. Don't drop the books.
It's about the owner of the agency that has been employing the services of yourself and Kobayashi.
What do you want to ask about Deha?
I'll cut straight to the point. Do you honestly believe him a man worthy of your trust?
I'm not certain what you're getting at.
Recently, I've heard some rather unsavory rumors. In specific, that there have been, among those who have donated large sums of money to churches or workhouses, some whose behavior has taken on a rather dubious aspect.
Dubious?
The purchasing of illegal drugs beneath churches for their own profit, or dragging poor children from the slums and workhouses for conscription into suspicious organizations, for example. Of course, all I have to go off is hearsay and speculation, but that such crimes are happening in London is beyond doubt. You can read about them in the papers. And the owner of the agency where you are employed is among those who donates exorbitant sums to a church. So...
He would never...
Akachi interrupted Holmes before he could even finish, his voice tense.
Holmes, you cannot mean to tell me your suspicions were aroused by an act of charity to a church.
It brings me no joy to dwell upon it, but it is in the shadows of such kindnesses that such crimes have been perpetuated, hidden from the eyes of the law.
Deha would do no such thing.
How can you be so sure? For all you know, he may well just be using the 2 of you.
Holmes, there are some things that ought not to be said, even by you.
Akachi's tone intensified, laced with an uncharacteristic anger. You're letting your feelings blind you to the truth.
All my life I have been supported by the kindness of others. Most have turned me away, but that small number who did not are the ones who have allowed me to come as far as I have. Since I lost my mother as a young child, I have been striving to my utmost to gain recognition from those around me. No matter how often others held me to be pitiful or unwanted, I simply gritted my teeth and continued pressing forward. My own family left me to be raised by another. Perhaps a blessing in disguise, as it was absent their support that I met a man in whom I could truly place my trust. My master. But after doing what I believed to be right, even he turned his back on me.
Akachi spoke with a quiet, rising intensity, but I could hear his voice quaver ever so slightly.
I had but one option left to me. To continue following that path in which I firmly believed. To press on, until at last I win for myself a place where I truly belong. Unlike you, who lives the life of a detective without so much as a brush with hardship, I have paid in sweat and toil to get where I am. Here, as in Japan, I have been able to keep pushing forward thanks to the kindness of a precious few good souls. Someone like you, blessed with every advantage, has no right to look down upon or deny all that I've worked so hard to obtain. I will not allow it.
I had never heard him sound so pained before.
Akachi.
I was transfixed, unable to move from where I stood.
I'll not deny the difference in our upbringings, and it follows that the courses of our lives would lead us to think in different ways as well. But tell me, are you truly allowing yourself to be mastered by your emotions? That's unlike you.
Is it? Do you know what else is unlike me? Doubting the goodwill of others. If that is all you wish to ask of me, I shall take my leave now.
Before the words had even left his mouth, Akachi turned and began walking away.
Oh dear. What should I do? He's coming right this way.
Realizing I would surely be spotted if I stayed where I stood, I leapt out from behind the pillar, only to find myself staring him squarely in the face.
Akachi! What a surprise!
Miss Whiteley.
I could tell he was taken aback, stunned, nearly speechless by my unexpected appearance.
What are you doing here? Did you hear all of that?
He seemed to deduce the answer for himself from my nervous behavior, without having to wait for my reply. The expression he wore was full of more sorrow than I had ever seen in him before.
I'm so sorry, Akachi.
You were the one person I would most have wished to not hear that.
Akachi turned his back to me, hanging his head. I felt my chest tighten at the sight. Unable to resist my impulse, I began to run toward him.
Wait, Akachi!
Come no closer!
Ah!
He swung his hand out as though to ward me off, but instead struck my own arm. And as my grip faltered in that moment, the stack of books I had been holding went tumbling to the floor.
Oh!
No doubt he had no intention of making physical contact, for I had never seen him look so flustered.
I'm so sorry, Miss Whiteley. Are you all right?
I thought I heard a commotion, though I was not expecting to find you at its center, Miss Whiteley. What need have you of all those books on Japan?
Holmes.
Holmes bent down and began to pick up some of the books from the floor. Just as he had begun, however, the hand Akachi had extended to me stopped.
I suppose you ran into Akachi and dropped your reading material. A foible characteristic of you, of course, but seeing as they are the library's property and not your own, denting and dirtying them would constitute property damage, you know.
Yes, that's right. I can't believe I failed to notice him right in front of me. I really do need to be more careful. You needn't worry, Akachi. I'm not hurt at all.
I did my best to put forth as cheerful a front as I could, in the hopes that he wouldn't realize how shaken his repelling swing had made me.
Excuse me.
Oh!
He turned his back once more and without another word walked away.
I need to go after him.
Still, the first time, I had been desperate to pursue him, but having been spurned by him once already, my own fear fixed me to the spot. I couldn't bring myself to move an inch, or even retrieve the books that lay scattered around me.
Miss Whiteley, it seems to me that hefting this many books at once was rather overambitious of you. Allow me to carry them to the classroom. But first, you ought to tend to your face.
My face?
Have you not noticed? You look terrible. My. My schoolmates certainly can prove a troublesome lot, can't they? The two of you are shining examples of that.
Holmes, do you think Akachi hates me?
If you wish to know the answer, go and ask him yourself.
But I'm too scared.
Oh. So, there are things that cause even you to quail. Honestly, the two of you really are the hopeless sort.
Holmes's words proved cold comfort, but he was kind enough to carry my stack of books for me as he had offered. Well, you know, he's still in love with you too, so it's kind of awkward for you to ask him advice about another guy, you know. You know how it is. That day, after school, I returned to the mansion, but from there set out again for the streets of Bishopsgate. I could only assume my gloom had been writ clearly upon my face, for Pendleton, who had escorted me hence by carriage, expressed his concern. Thinking on what had happened still caused my heart to ache, but far more dreadful was the prospect of doing nothing at all, of succumbing to the desolation of my soul. Sequestering myself and turning over what happened will do me no good. I need to see Akachi and apologize for eavesdropping like I did. But if he sends me away... Just as my malaise threatened again to overtake me, I saw a familiar figure in the distance. That's... Dehar? He was crossing the road ahead of me and looked to be in a hurry. Oh no. Well, our curious girl is probably going to get herself into a predicament. And Akashi is going to have to choose between Dehar and Emily. Probably, I'm going to call it now. I thought to call out to him, then stayed my tongue, recalling what Holmes had said earlier that day.
Recently, I've heard some rather unsavory rumors. In specific, that there have been, among those who have donated large sums of money to churches or workhouses, some whose behavior has taken on a rather dubious aspect. The purchasing of illegal drugs beneath churches for their own profit, or dragging poor children from the slums and workhouses for conscription into suspicious organizations, for example. Of course, all I have to go off is hearsay and speculation, but that such crimes are happening in London is beyond doubt. You can read about them in the papers. How can you be so sure? For all you know, he may well just be using the two of you.
It defies belief that Dehar would be that sort of person. But if the unlikely should prove to be true, it would mean he really is using Akachi and Kobayashi. A pervasive sense of unease hung over me, knowing that Akachi and Kobayashi would pay a dear price if Dehar truly was the kind of person Holmes seemed to believe. I truly hope I'm wrong, and yet I can't shake this feeling. Taking care that he didn't notice me as I trailed well behind him, I followed Dehar's trail. There we go. Maintaining my steady pace, I found myself gazing up at his destination, St. Spira Church. Could this be the very same that Dehar has made all those donations to? I knew that if I took my eyes off him even for a moment, I would lose sight of him, a circumstance I wished to avoid at all costs. Rather than entering into the church from the front, he instead took a narrow path that wound behind it. What business would compel him to go not into the church, but to its rear? The path he had trod terminated in a single unremarkable shed. A dead end? Where could he have gone? Careful not to make so much as a sound, I carefully nudged the shed's door open. A first glance revealed nothing out of the ordinary. A standard storage shed, replete with boxes and dark corners and bedecked with spider webs and dust. I'm saying this out loud to myself. However, one particular detail caught my eyes. I noticed that one particular part of the door was wholly free of dust, a marked contrast from the rest. A careful inspection of that section of the floor revealed a hidden door that could be lifted to reveal an entrance. Cautiously, I grasped the handle and opened it. A staircase. Does it lead beneath the church? Did Dehar make his way down through here? I need to investigate. Still uneasy, I summoned my courage and made my way down the stone staircase to the subterranean chamber. This is going to be bad news, bears. Having taken great pains to make not a sound during my descent, I at last reached the bottom of the stairs. This is... Ooh. This looks familiar. The sight that unfolded before my eyes threatened to draw the very breath from my lungs. Is this some kind of ritual? What are so many children doing here? I blanched at the feeling of dread that washed over me, for I stood upon the unhallowed ground of the very same sort of black ritual whose gruesome details had filled the newspapers of late. A magic circle had been drawn upon the floor and was now surrounded on all sides by what appeared to be destitute children.
Now fight! Kill! Body upon body, limb upon limb! Show to Spellbound the true measure of your merit.
Is that Dehar?
I barely recognized the Dehar I saw standing near the magic circle, so wild and hollow his aspect seemed in the wan light.
What's wrong? This is a sacred rite. There is naught you need fear. Take up your duty and spill the blood of the sacrifice.
His voice trilled as though taken in the pangs of ecstasy. In one of his raised hands, he clutched an orange and black mask, its shape that of a tiger's face. Within the circle, 2 children stood facing one another. Each clutched a knife in their small hands, knuckles white. The sight seemed surreal to me.
They couldn't!
The disturbing scene playing out before me set my teeth on edge. The figures surrounding the circle, adults and children alike, seemed overcome with euphoria as they shouted at the 2 boys who now faced off.
What's going on? This is wicked. The basest depravity. And the smell. Some vapors inducing lightheadedness.
Though I could not identify its source, a smell that pervaded the atmosphere of that infernal den began to play upon all my senses, bringing me to doubt whether this present scene was truly real. Dizziness then took hold of me, and I placed my hand against the wall to steady myself. Just as I began to regain my footing, loud cries burst forth from the crowd, reverberating up and down the hall.
That's it! Cut his throat! No! Straight through the heart! Go on! Go on!
I couldn't bear to watch for a single second more.
I need to hurry. They must know about this place. If Akachi and Kobayashi end up being taken here.
Just as I turned to flee back the way I had come, I was grabbed from behind, my nose and mouth smothered by a cold cotton cloth. No sooner had I felt its touch than my vision began to blur, my consciousness slipping from me. Chloroform? I struggled as best I could, wriggling and kicking, but the sum of my strength was as effectual against the arms restraining me as wind howling against a mountain.
Is this a drug? No, can't be caught. Not here. Must tell Akachi.
Against the power of that terrible chemical, my determination failed me, and my consciousness slipped away into the dark abyss. Oh boy. We're in so much trouble.
So Lady Emily did not visit you, then?
Correct.
Neither of us have seen her since school let out for the day.
I see. She told me she intended to pay you a visit, so I thought that's where she would have gone. It was clear something was weighing upon her, however. I had assumed she had some matter she wished to discuss with the 2 of you.
The day that Pendleton came to call upon Akachi and Kobayashi, Emily had been uncharacteristically absent from classes due to illness. They later learned from Pendleton, however, that Emily was in fact missing, and last seen making her way to the office where they worked.
Well, should the 2 of you happen to recall anything else that may help in locating her, please let me know. I implore you.
With a nod, Pendleton left the office.
It was on a Tuesday when Pendleton last saw her, too. One of the 2 days each week that Dehar disappears.
Kobayashi, you aren't suggesting that he may be somehow involved in her disappearance, are you?
But that's the only premise that makes sense to me right now. What other reason might there be for Emily to have set out to visit us but never have arrived? As for me, I intend to head to St. Spira Church, with or without you. What will you do, Akachi?
You gotta make your choice. Man, I can't believe she's been gone for days. Girl got knocked out.
How long have I been here? What time is it? What day?
Locked in a dark cell, I found it impossible to accurately mark the passage of time. My only means of approximating how long had passed was the number of times the guards brought me bread and water. Listening to the guards converse, I had gathered that underground area in which I was being held was replete with children carefully funneled in from workhouses in the poorest districts of the city.
Workhouses are supported through donations and national aid. I can't believe the blight of corruption would have taken root even in such public facilities. I had thus far pieced together that the children here were to be taken abroad to serve as soldiers for the organization, likely in the British colony of Hong Kong. Worse still, they're planning to ensure no evidence remains of what happened here by putting the entire place to the torch. I cannot let them get away with that! But trapped here as I am, what can I do?
At this rate, I would either be killed so as to prevent me from revealing what I knew, or taken abroad with the others. In either case, I would be unable to get a message to anyone I knew.
What am I to do? What's going to happen to me? There's a chance Akechi could be made into a pawn in this scheme somehow. I need to let him know of all that's happening, but there seems to be no escape for me.
I had done my best to suppress my gnawing sense of unease, but it crept to the surface once again, and the next moment I felt tears stream down my cold cheeks.
Again. They said some manner of drug, crystal they called it, was being burned here. It is supposed to heighten one's emotions, to weaken their sense of fear.
When even the slightest pangs of loneliness or hopelessness settled upon me, I found myself crying. If ever there was a less convenient time to cry, I could scarcely name it. Poor Emily. I wiped my tear-stained face with my arm, as though hoping to likewise banish my sorrows. Meanwhile, above ground, Akechi and Kobayashi stood in St. Spira Church. Whoa. Their gazes were fixed on a single man who stood motionless within the chapel.
What do you make of him, Akechi?
His behavior is highly suspect. I doubt he is here to worship. Never moving from that spot, frequently scanning the room. Strange behavior for a parishioner, but perfectly in line with what one would expect of a sentry.
What should we do? Wait a bit long?
No. I'm done waiting.
What? Akechi, wait a...
Kobayashi tried in vain to hold him back.
Ah!
The man had taken notice of Akechi and began moving to intercept him, but with a few swift motions, Akechi had locked the man tightly in a restraining hold.
You're those kids from Dehars! How did you find out about this place? So Dehar really is involved.
Now, I would very much like to hear a concise summary of what is happening here, and you seem able enough to furnish that information.
Akechi tightened his hold on the man.
Ah!
Resorting to violence would not be my preferred choice. However, if she has been caught up in this, I will do what I must.
Dang. He gonna kill a man to get his girl out of here. You mean business. I could not tell how much time had passed. The only certainty was the slowness of its passage. But after once more wiping away the tears that fell heedless of my own will...
You den of cowards! How could you stoop so low as to use children as shields? Ha! Don't make me laugh. What need have I to deal fairly with a monkey like you? I can't believe you really went into the mirror room. You're either painfully brave or painfully stupid.
Wait, I know that voice.
Now go on and keep the rats company. They'll be glad to share the space with another animal. Gah!
The voices had drawn quite close, and I peered out in time to see someone being kicked into the cell beside mine. And, for a moment, I was stunned into silence at the familiar face that met my gaze.
Kobayashi!
Hurrying to the bar separating our cells, I reached through and clasped his hands in mine.
Emily! So you were captured after all! Are you alright? Have they done anything to you?
I'm fine, but what about you?
Oh, this? It's nothing. Nothing at all. Ouch! Damn. First, I wind up in some strange room with mirrors all over, and when I decided to stand and fight, they paraded their captives before us.
Kobayashi staggered as he attempted to stand once more, holding his chest with his free hand.
We split up to have a better chance of finding you. And now look at me, going and getting myself caught like this.
Don't! You shouldn't move.
What's this, little mousy? Not a peep out of you, no matter how many times I tried to make conversation. But as soon as your little friend shows up, you're suddenly all talk.
Ah!
Emily! Hey, you!
Suddenly, the guard grabbed me from behind, pinning me against his chest with all his strength. The aroma of crystal hung thick in the air, and my head felt as though it was going to burst.
Let go of me!
If you've got that much energy, how about you and I have a little fun, shall we? I'll show you a real good time.
The guard thrust his face up against mine, and I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins.
Stop!
Come again? I couldn't hear you. Say it again. Scream it to me!
Hard of hearing? Then allow me to convey her intentions clearly.
Gah!
What?
In the darkness of the cavern, I heard a familiar voice. The guard's arms loosened their grip and fell away entirely as the man crumpled to the ground. Oh, your sense of timing is so good.
Get away from her at once.
I knew that silver-framed face all too well. His eyes were narrowed, his form poised.
Akachi!
My relief at seeing him there overwhelmed me.
Miss Whiteley.
What?
I feared for a moment I might stop breathing entirely.
Oh, hi. Aw, you worried your boy silly.
Akachi staggered toward me, as though momentarily taking leave of his balance, but wrapped his arms around me, catching himself. It was all so sudden that I was fixed to the spot.
Akachi?
I'm so sorry, Emily. Just seeing you unharmed. I felt such a weight lifted from me.
Alright, I gotta see this hug you're doing. Nah.
Akachi?
I'm so glad you're all right.
He seems to be in pain. And the smell.
Akachi's breathing came ragged and uneven, and the scent of crystal clinging about him was stronger still than that of the guard he had struck down with the back of his blade. Seeing him in such obvious agony drained the color from my face.
Akachi! What happened?
After defeating perhaps 10 guards, I tried to stop the children. A room with some manner of occultist circle.
The children!
Memories of that lurid sight I had witnessed just before my capture came flooding back.
After I stopped them, Dehar, with some kind of drug, blocked the impact with sword, but you're the last person I wanted to see me like this. A disgraceful mess. In the end, I'm still the pitiful excuse for a man I have ever been.
Though I couldn't see his expression, the trembling in his voice sounded as though he was in great pain. Anguish both physical and mental.
You are no such thing, Akachi!
Akachi, perhaps in a lucid moment of awareness, released his hold on me, but overcome by our reunion, I clung to him, keeping him near.
You're not pitiful at all! I have never heard a more preposterous statement.
Miss Whiteley.
Besides, you yourself have said that it isn't right to make light of oneself.
Too choked up to continue, I simply clung to him in silence. Akachi was a man ever ready to run to the aid of someone in need, heedless of the danger to himself, and right now was no exception. I could never regard someone so full of kindness as pitiful. And I wished I could convey those very thoughts to him, but the words caught in my throat, and only tears poured forth once more.
The sight of his face is as much a relief to me as mine must have been to him.
Not yet wanting to separate myself from that moment of relief, I tightened my arms around his chest. By the way, Kobayashi, thanks for being such a bro and just keeping busy in the cell while the two of them had their moment. Just like, it'd be nice to get out of here, but they're having their moment. I'm just gonna, count the spiders in here instead. What a bro. Best wingman, Kobayashi. Following our reunion, we availed ourselves of the keys the unconscious guard had in his possession, and freed from our cells, we tended to Akachi as he rested in an area well hidden from view.
Are you thirsty?
I'm fine, thank you. I feel much better now.
That must have been some drug to take such a toll on you.
Quaffing the water I had with me seemed to have done much to aid in Akachi's recovery.
I overheard something from the guards here before the two of you arrived. They were discussing how, soon, all the children here were to be taken to Hong Kong to serve as soldiers for their organization. And that this whole underground warren was to be set ablaze to dispose of any evidence as well. So, for the children's sake, in addition to our own, we need to escape and let Scotland Yard know what's going on.
Kobayashi, I'm afraid I still lack my full adroitness. If I might ask you...
Say no more. I'll lead the way. Emily will be there to care for you every step of the way.
Care for me?
You heard me. Emily, he's in your hands now.
All right.
Miss Whiteley.
Akachi?
I have something I need to say to you later. So...
Hey, Akachi! Don't go giving her any of that "when we make it through this battle, let's get married" nonsense. It's bad luck. We haven't any idea how long we've got until they set this place ablaze. Escape is our top priority.
In my current condition, I will skip ahead.
Curse my heavy fingers. Yes.
In my current condition, I can hardly tell you to leave things to me, but...
Okay, now we're back.
But what?
Akachi gently took my hand in his.
At the very least, allow me to take your hand.
Oh my god, he's willingly holding hands with a girl! This drug is incredible!
Thank you.
I tightened my grip, feeling the warmth of his palm. And so we began our escape. The surface seemed far, however, and our current plight would not be so easily resolved. Countless children, their minds muddled by the fumes of the cult's drug, streamed out to block our way one after another. Had it been members of the organization standing in our way, the matter would have been a simpler one, but the children were merely victims, innocents brought there against their will. Both Akachi and Kobayashi refused to harm them, making their task all the more difficult, which is why they're being used. Finally, with great trouble, we reached the staircase that led to the surface. But at that moment, a terrible sight greeted us. Akachi froze in horror, his gaze focused on a single figure ahead.
That's...
Perhaps addled by the drug or in the black grip of despair, a small boy stood holding a knife turned upon himself, hand shaking. Please don't let it be, Rick. Oh no, okay, so it's the same, oh boy, taking him back. Whew. Okay, well that got heavy very quickly.
The nobles had thrown the child a knife and made sport of pressuring him to take his own life in exchange for money. No reasonable person would blame Akachi for being incensed. But his master drove Akachi out of the only home he had ever known. With the words, "You are no longer my student," his fate was decided. Akachi hasn't said a word about his master since we arrived, but deep beneath the surface, I think he's still dwelling on all that happened.
All the other children nearby seemed in such a trance that they paid the boy no heed.
Hurry, you two!
Even as Kobayashi's words landed on Akachi's ears, I was already in motion.
What?
I relinquished my grasp on Akachi's hand and thrust him away with all the strength I could muster. I made a dash toward the boy who seemed poised to take his own life at any moment. Dang, girl. You are hardcore.
Miss Whiteley!
Throwing my arms around the boy, I cradled him in my embrace. The knife clattered to the floor, released from his small, shaking hands.
It's all right. Everything is going to be better now.
My head swam. Perhaps they were burning an even more potent form of their drug, or perhaps they had already set the fire to destroy the evidence gathered here. Whatever it might have been, with the boy still clutched to my breast, my vision blurred and consciousness fled from me once more. The last I remembered before the world went black was someone calling my name as from a great distance. Man, that line takes me back to Hakuoki. So many bad ends ended like that. I'm like, oh boy. That's bad news bears. To be continued. Grand.